Hey everyone, welcome back to Bookshelves. My name is Shelby, and this is a cozy corner on the internet where we talk about all things reading, writing, and any other bookish stuff that comes my way. I am really excited to share today a little 2026 goal setting video, specifically when it comes to writing. This was a really fun opportunity because I got a chance to look back at my 2025 goals and just to reflect on how far I've come on my writing journey, if you will. So grab a cozy beverage. I have a little hot lemon honey situation today, and settle in. And we'll talk a little bit about everything I accomplished in 2025, and more importantly, everything I hope to accomplish in 2026. So when I looked back at my 2025 goals, they were sort of broken out into 4 different categories. It was all about living a joyful, comfortable, organized life. There were goals about building routine cleaning habits around the house and doing some major home improvement projects, all of which happened this year that were so exciting. A lot about maintaining and building new relationships that were important to me. Lots in there about taking care of my person, tracking what I eat and kind of building out nutrition information for a lot of our favorite meals, trying to build some kind of movement hobby habit, which, that one eludes me ever still. But then there was also a section about joyful activities, spending my free time in ways that made me happy. And then that ideally didn't involve doom scrolling. There were several existing hobbies that I already had built into that little goal section. Things about my D&D games and reading and knitting, almost certainly. But I added something that was at the time totally aspirational, and that was building time for a writing habit again. I loved writing as a kid, and it's always felt like a part of my identity, but it was a part of my life that was long dormant, I think is fair to say. I picked reading up again as an adult in 2020. I was 4 or 5 years deep into reading again and had started to be filled with all of this creative energy that made me think maybe writing was something that I should really prioritize. So that was my only goal related to writing in 2025, was make time for writing again. And that I did. I really did treat it as an aspiration when I wrote it down. I didn't really know for sure if that was something I would act on. But I spent the first quarter of the year really taking seriously an idea that I'd had. And in the second quarter, in April, I started writing. And while the writing has been on and off in different sort of waves throughout the year, I've done a lot of writing. And now I not only do that writing, but I've been documenting that process on my channel. So in that time, I've written just under 40,000 words, or the first part of a 4-part novel that I've imagined and that I talk about on this channel as Project Laurels. It's a Greek mythology retelling. It centers a female protagonist who is well known and often appears in a variety of Greek myths, but who is never really at the center. But her story is one that really, really called to me. And I'm having the time of my life writing this book, something that has been little pieces, little ideas in my head for so long are finally coming to life before my very eyes, and I'm having an absolute blast. So as that writing practice evolved, I definitely imagined some of my own additional mid-year goals, right? I approached the start of the writing process very curiously, but I think I very quickly found myself drawn to having set goals around word count, or about number of days that I write, or about the hours I write. But I'm not sure that that was really always to my benefit, because after the first couple months of writing, I started to notice myself getting really anxious anytime I thought I was doing writing wrong, right? If I had gone too many days without writing, or I sat down and I really wanted to write, but I only got out a couple hundred words. And that's like a bit of a red flag for me. This is just a hobby. It's something I'm doing for fun. I would love to see it go somewhere someday, maybe, but I'm a person with a lot of interests. I'm a busy person. I have lots of different interests and relationships that I want to nurture, and it's okay if writing isn't my one and only. So I share all of that as some kind of context for what I want to focus on going into 2026. So in 2025, I reestablished my writing habit. I committed to a project, that being Project Laurels. And in addition to writing and to kind of trying to cultivate a routine around writing, I also started to take in some different information. I started to seek out information about writing as a practice, as a skill, and that came in lots of different forms. I started watching so much AuthorTube. It was something that I'd followed in bits and pieces over the years, but I wasn't super enmeshed in the world. But, hearing other people talk about their experience writing from a similar kind of place of like noviceness was really affirming, and I learned a lot about how different people think about the writing process from watching AuthorTube videos. And I truly do watch so much AuthorTube. It's like kind of ridiculous, but it is truly so motivational and instructive on my own journey. I'll name drop a few of them here. I'm sure you all have your faves, and I would love to know who your go-to AuthorTubers are down below. So drop a comment with anybody else I should be following. Some of the big names who I started following this year are folks like Chris and Lynn and Alyssa and Brielle and Natalie. Who else? Oh, Becca, Meredith. I mean, the list goes on and on. Lindsay, Christian Jones, of course, she's like the queen of AuthorTube, I think is fair to say. Her content is always so cozy and wonderful. So all of those people make content that is fun and relatable, but it's also motivational and, like I said, instructive. It helps me understand my own experiences. It helps me anticipate problems and kind of think about how I can build those considerations into my own process. And in moments where I feel like absolutely insane for having taken on this like ridiculous project, to dare to believe that I actually might write a book, I turn to their channels and feel like, okay, yeah, maybe I can do it. They get it. They think they can do it too. Many of them have had big successes this year too. They've signed with agents. They've signed contracts for book publishing deals, So it's not only instructive and motivational from a sort of like peer-to-peer, we're all learning together perspective, but in many ways it feels like some of them are really like leveling up before my eyes, and I get to like see what the next stage in the process is and what I might be aspiring towards, what I might hope to have for myself one day. So, but anyway, I would seriously recommend finding a couple people who make you smile, make you laugh, who make you feel seen when it comes to writing, because they're really helpful to turn to when you feel ridiculous or when you feel down about what you're able to achieve or not able to achieve. It's a very affirming sense of community that you can really foster by being plugged into other people's writing projects. I also watched all of Brandon Sanderson's lectures on fantasy writing, which are recorded when he teaches them at BSU and posted every like 4 years. He does like an updated version, or maybe every 5. I think I've watched the last 3 cycles of them now, but that was super instructive. I learned so much from that series. And I also have kind of been giving myself a crash course in a wide variety of ancient Greek stuff. So I've continued to consume modern retellings, which is really what got me interested in the genre, and of course continues to inspire the work that I write. But I've also started going to the source material more. So I've been, sticking my toes into the world of reading like the Iliad, the Odyssey, ancient plays, trying to acquaint myself with the content that inspired all those modern retellings. Similarly, I've also been trying to learn more from a nonfiction perspective about ancient Greek myth. And so I have, watched little documentaries about the different ancient settings I'm writing about. And most recently, I am about to finish a phenomenal book by Emily Hauser. It's called Penelope's Bones in America, and it's called Mythica in England, for whatever ridiculous reason. But it's a nonfiction piece about women in the ancient world, specifically women in Homer's ancient world. And it is phenomenal. So that's been so valuable to my writing from a historical perspective, to really place myself in that time. There's so many little questions that I encounter, like, what did people do with their free time? Did this food exist yet? There's just a million questions you could ask when writing about a time that is so long ago. And I've really enjoyed learning about all of that in more depth. So those are the kind of principles that I want to build on in 2026. And now we can kind of pivot and actually talk about my 2026 goals, now that we've acquainted ourselves with what I'd hoped for out of 2025 and what I actually did, which was frankly a lot more than I ever could have imagined in January of last year. So my first really big goal is to finish draft 1 of Project Laurels next year. I would particularly like to finish it before fall of 2026, which would be about a year and a half from when I started it, because I started it in April of this year. I think that's more than enough time for a first draft. I think a lot of people write a first draft in a year or less. But I just want to recognize that I'm moving at a very slow pace. And some people really take a first draft approach that is underwriting. I'm taking a first draft approach that is definitely overwriting. I know that I'm writing scenes that won't be in the final book. The first quarter of the book is shaping up to be about 40,000 words. That would put it at 160,000 at the end, and nobody's going to publish that. Certainly not for a debut novel, right? So I am writing much more than will be in the final product, I think, right now, because I'm telling myself the story, and I want to make room for that. I think that's really important and instructive for me in understanding the world that I'm building. But it means it takes a bit longer to do. And it is, just one of many things I'm juggling. So I think, fall of 2026 would be a substantial, reasonable amount of time to have been working on that first draft. It's also a time in my life where there could be some changes happening. All of that is still up in the air at this point for December 2025 me, but I want to keep in mind that things could come up and could change. And if that's the case, I would really like to have a first draft done before then. So that's goal number 1. Finish Project Laurels by fall of 2026. My next major goal is to revisit my writing routine. I've talked about my writing routine a bit on the channel. I made a video about my 6 a.m. writing routine over the summer, and I have been happy with it when I'm in the swing of it. I sincerely mean it. When I am routinely getting up at 6 a.m. and starting my days, just this quiet morning with me and the computer, when the book is the first thing on my mind, there's not other stuff cluttering my thoughts, and I don't have the tiredness that accompanies the end of my day. I love that. That is such a wonderful time, and it's been a really productive time. But anytime something changes in my schedule that makes 6 a.m. hard to attain, I get just so off course, and it's very hard and time and energy consuming to rebuild that habit. So, heaven forbid I stay up super late for something one night, then I'm not gonna, want to get up super early the next day, because I treasure my sleep. I think 8 hours of sleep is important. And so, it just would sort of spiral. So anytime I would have a disruption like that, something small and simple and something to be expected in the day-to-day life, stuff happens. I felt like I would just be off course for a really long time. It might take me as much as a week to build back up to that 6 a.m. And then heaven forbid something else happened and I have to sort of restart that cycle, right? And anytime I was out of the habit, but I had kind of committed to it being my habit, committed to it being my routine, I would feel so guilty. And I just don't think that guilt is productive. You know what I mean? First of all, as I've already said, Writing is supposed to be a fun thing for me. And if I'm stressed doing the thing that's my fun thing, I want to notice that and I want to understand why that is and I want to adjust. So when I say I want to revisit the idea of the 6 a.m. writing routine, it might just be to interrogate like why I'm so distraught anytime I'm not actively doing it well, doing it right. Maybe it's about the expectation that the 6 a.m. writing routine is an everyday routine, right? Maybe I need to get comfortable with when it happens, and that's great. But maybe I need to sort of adjust my sense of what a successful version of that routine looks like. Or maybe it's that I want to build a writing habit that's a little bit less flappable. Like find a different time or maybe bulk time on the weekend where I can get long periods of focused writing in, but it's more flexible. It's less reliant on everything else in my life going well, So I still want to noodle on that. I think there's a lot of different ways revisiting my writing routine could shake out in 2026. But I want to be honest with myself that I notice myself stressing about that. And that's not helpful. Because then it makes me worried when I do sit down to write, I've been so bad at this because I haven't been doing it. And nobody needs that noise in their head when they're trying to do something productive and creative and imagine something to put on the page. So yeah, I want to revisit the writing routine. Not sure exactly what that will look like yet, but I think it's fair to say that something about my approach needs to change because I want to approach writing joyfully and as stress-free as I can, as often as I can. And then I also want to build on the different kind of new areas of learning that I was doing in 2025. One of those is, of course, learning more about the craft of writing. And there's such a wide world of writing craft literature out there. So I think I want to maybe commit to, the broad commitment is to continue learning about writing craft. The more specific commitment I think I can reasonably make is to read a new craft book every 2 months, right? So 6 craft books by the end of the year. And I've got a lot of them already kind of flagged and on my radar. So I'm thinking about picking up books in this world like Steering the Craft by Ursula K. Le Guin, On Writing by Stephen King, The Anatomy of a Story by John Truby. What else? Dave the Cat writes a novel, which everybody on AuthorTube talks about. There's a beat sheet in particular that people seem to really love and refer to in sort of plotting out their books. Oh, and Marie Brennan has a book series out all about writing called New Worlds, where she talks all about sort of the art of world building. So those are books I want to read or listen to, probably more likely listen to so that I move through them a bit more quickly, all about writing as an art form. And some of them are more, writing is a practice. Some of them are more concrete, like, sort of the structure of stories. And others still are more about world building and sort of story design from a sort of fantasy and sci-fi perspective. So I think there's a good mix in there, but I expect that will be really helpful as I finish my draft and maybe even start thinking about revising it. My last goal also builds on this sort of new habit I've started to pick up on this year, which is all about learning about ancient history. So kind of taking that nonfiction topical and content approach as opposed to the craft focus. I've, like I said, so loved Penelope's Bones by Emily Hauser. It has been incredibly inspirational, in addition to it also being just super useful and practical information. And there's a whole host of books out there in this sort of vein that I think would be really instructive to pick up. So I thought I'd flag a few of those as well that are on my radar. All of these are ancient history books about women in the ancient world, different occupations, different regions, anything that will kind of help me have a deeper understanding of the setting the place, the people, the politics that are at the center of my story. There are a lot of these on my radar. The one I'm most excited about that I just heard is coming into existence is Aphrodisia by Jean Mignus. I love Jean's work. I have been a longtime viewer of her channel. She's here on YouTube, but she's also an author of all things ancient mythology. She's a doctor of classic studies, I think. And her book is all about the ancient world, women, and sexual pleasure, which I think will be so instructive and important to have in mind as I'm writing a book with a female protagonist in the ancient world. There's also a book called The Missing Thread, which is about women's lives in ancient history. That book is by Daisy Dunn. Another big sort of scholarly name in the world of ancient literature and women is Bettany Hughes, and she has a book about Helen of Troy. You know, she's such an iconic figure, but I think a deep dive into her life will likely illuminate lots of things that are relevant to my protagonist as well. There's a book called Ancient Magic by Philip Matizak, which is all about like spells, potions, healing practices from ancient Greece. I think that will be very useful for all of the times where I go, well, they didn't have Tylenol, you know, like sort of how people deal with the daily aches and pains of life, major injuries, all of that good stuff. There's a lot to know about the world of medicine, and it's particularly relevant to the story that I'm writing. There's a book called Women at War by Paul Crystal that I'm really curious about. I'm not sure exactly what all it will entail. I know it's about the ancient world. I don't know if it's about women engaged in warfare from like the women warrior perspective, or more about the kind of role of women when men are at war, role of women when war comes to their home and conquers their home, right? I think there could be a lot of different avenues that that book explores that would be very relevant to the work that I'm putting together. Another one that's been on my radar for a while is a book by Joan Benton Connolly. It's called The Portrait of a Priestess. I think this is a sort of classic text. It's, I think, a little older, but it's all about the role of the priestess, which seems to have been a very socially important role for a woman in ancient Greece, a time when women didn't often have as many important social roles. So I'm really curious to pick that up and kind of get that added context and nuance about what the lives of priestesses might have looked like in ancient Greece. Two other books that have been on my radar. One is Goddesses, Whores, Wives, and Slaves, a book on women in antiquity by Sarah Pomeroy. This, again, I think is just going to be really valuable context for the role of women in the ancient world, hopefully the varied roles of women. I'm particularly curious about the lives of enslaved women. I've seen that depicted quite a lot in modern retellings of ancient myth, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around exactly what that life looked like and how people kind of found themselves in enslavement. So I think that will be really helpful context again as well. And the last that I'll flag today is The Heroines of Olympus by Ellie Mackin Roberts. This book is, I think, a mix of like goddesses and other major figures from Greek mythology. I don't think it's exclusively about the goddesses themselves, but you know, just another sort of compilation and take on the different women who are major figures in Greek mythology. I think perusing those, probably like alternating them with the craft books, I'd like to do at least 6 of them next year, will just give me so much more context and depth about the world that I'm writing in. And much like Penelope's Bones is, I hope they will also really keep me inspired and keep like generating new ideas for me as I continue writing in my draft. So there you go. Those are my writing goals for 2026. 4 major goals: finish the draft, revisit my writing routine, pick up books on craft, and pick up books on the ancient world. I would love to know if you all are setting any writing goals in 2026. If you had any for 2025, how did they shake out? What were you happy with? What wasn't working for you? And if you're working on something in the new year, if you're thinking about taking on a new project, I would love to hear all about it in the comments down below. So let's talk shop about all things writing, and I will see you all soon in another video. Bye.